Been kicking around the idea of going paperless? Are you considering a document management solution? Maybe you just want to ask some questions, but don't want to be bombarded by aggressive salespeople.
Give us a call. We'll be happy to answer your questions and show you how you can save money with our award-winning copiers and printers and our amazing service team.
Who, in case you didn't know, will be there in 4 hours or less to service your machine guaranteed, and we have a 97% first-time fix rate. Check us out at deximaging.com or give us a call.
In Ocala, dial 352-433-4090. That's 433-4090.
Pals Ocala Auto Repair fixes all makes and models. Pals makes sure that your vehicle's engine, mechanical, and electrical components are healthy at all times. Pals team would much rather see you drive to their shop for a full checkup than be towed in for a complex repair. Give Pals a call today to schedule your next service appointment. 352-414-2984. What? A nationwide warranty, 36 months or 36,000 miles, whichever comes first? Pals looks forward to servicing you and servicing your vehicle. 352-414-2984.
Friday morning at 9:35, Bill Hurley, Executive Director of National Federation of Independent Businesses, will be our guest. The discussion will be to advocate support of the small business community and for pro-business policies. Small businesses are the backbone of our economic system. You are sure to be informed by Bill's information. So don't forget, tune in at 9:35 to learn more about small businesses and the challenges faced. It's news to inform from the source. WOCA, your hometown family station.
Hey everyone, I would like to encourage you to tune in this Friday morning at 8:50 a.m. when Craig Harrell, Republican candidate for county clerk, will be my guest. It's important to be an informed voter. Your right to choose your representatives is of vital importance, but it comes with the responsibility of being informed. So again, this Friday morning at 8:50 a.m., you'll have the opportunity to hear firsthand what Greg Harrell brings to the table. Feel free to call at 622-9622 with your questions, and thanks for listening. 96.3 FM, 1370 AM, The Source.
Sunshine in areas of high clouds and warm today with a high of 92 to 94. Tonight, partly to mostly cloudy and very warm, low 75. Cloudy tomorrow with showers and a thunderstorm, high 84 to 92. Saturday, a blend of sun and clouds with showers and a thunderstorm, humid, high 87 to 90. Sunday, clouds and sunshine, high 87 to 93. Florida Weather Center.
WOCA. Ocala.
Listening to AM Ocala Live. Good morning, Ocala. It's Thursday, April 23rd. AM Ocala Live here now, about 6 minutes past the top of the 10 o'clock hour. And we got a caller on the line. Thank you for holding there, caller. Sorry we couldn't get you with the timing, but we got you now. Good morning.
Good morning. It's Sonny again. Just a small example of inflation. The other, today you pay $1 to $1.29 for a candy bar that used to cost a nickel.
Yep.
That's sort of kind of warped in my book, but that's
considering the process that it takes to manufacture that candy bar, got even probably cheaper, and they can produce more units, way more than they could 50 years ago. Sure. And I was going to say, is that something we would see coming after all of this coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic? Is by 2021 what we see would be another somewhat inflation?
Well, I would say we've been experiencing inflation all along. I mean, look at the price of gas. The only reason why price of gas is down so much because nobody's driving anywhere. Mm-hmm. But that's another item.
Right.
I can, it's, to me, it's not a good thing. That's all I can say. I know it helps out a lot of people, but when I was working, and you had belonged to a union, and used to get your raises in small increments. So the first increment we took, the second increment we put away, the third we took, and the fourth. So every other small raise that came down the pike, we put away. If you were living off it before the raise and then you get a raise, that's extra money to live a little better.
Sure.
To me, if you take one and put it away and every other raise, and you have a nest egg. Mm-hmm. You have money for an emergency. I remember when my son was born, I still wasn't covered. I still didn't have maternity coverage. I had to go and take a loan out to get him out of the hospital.
Oh, wow.
Fortunately, I had I could afford to get that loan. Mm-hmm. Because of being a little thrifty. Sure. But anyway, this is. I think the government's going about it in the wrong way in a lot of instances, because I'm quite sure they could have turned around and worked a little harder on the big banks and all the other institutions that we have here, rather than just printing them money, to provide help for people.
Sure.
So anyway, again, have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, Sonny.
But this is just one person's opinion. Have a good day.
You too, buddy. Appreciate it. Yeah. Nonetheless, that's what. Yeah.
I understand his instinct to be concerned. I think he's voicing something that a lot of people are thinking. But it is such a challenge. How do you balance the individual need? It's easy to say in retrospect, well, people should have, but shoulda, coulda, woulda. The circumstances are what they are for people, and so I understand their desperation as well. So it's quite the balancing act. I'm glad I'm not in a position to have to make those kinds of decisions.
Yeah, and that makes you wonder about who's in those positions. Are those the right people to make those decisions? And that's a whole nother can of worms. And now that's part of the idea I wanted to bring to the show, is the different perspectives on it. And like you said, different vantage points, kind of the same topics. Now, with this segment too, it's on this day in history, which I look forward to doing a little bit. On this day in history is April 23rd. We're going to go back as far as 1898. In 1898, on April 23rd, Spain declared war in the United States. Spain declares war in the United States on this day in 1898 after rejecting America's ultimatum to withdraw from Cuba. Following the declaration of the Asiatic Squadron under Commodore George Dewey, engaged the Spanish Pacific Squadron under the Admiral Montojoy in Manila Bay, the Philippines, and then decimated the Spanish squadron. So it was on this day that Spain's like, hey, we want a peace. And that's a long time ago. That's eras ago. And that's, prior to 1900, 1898. Incredible, right? It's a whole different lifetime ago.
Well, it was interesting because, for the longest time, Spain had ruled the seas. The Spanish Armada was the ultimate, waterborne fighting force. And this was kind of the turning point where the New World, as they were calling it, kind of asserted their dominance.
And you know what? What a century for the United States when you really think about where things were ending. 1775 to 1776, July 4th. Okay. And then you look at the beginning of 1800. Then you go into, a new century, the War of 1812. One more push from the Redcoats. And then, as that entire century goes through, of course, we have a Civil War. So there's a combat in the ideology and states' rights and everything else going back and forth with our own self in our own country. And then, hey, one more. Hey, before we party like it's 1900, in 1898, Spain's like, we want a peace. And it's just incredible what that century was like. And then you see where we went with, from 1900 on in the 21st century. Incredible. Moving on from that, as we move, what doesn't feel, when I say from April 23rd, 1898, to April 23rd, 1922. When I look at these two dates, they're really not that far from each other in retrospect. Mm-hmm. Just a little over 25 years. Okay, so in 1922, look where we're at in the idea of the economy, revolution with the industry, all that good stuff. In 1922, though, a bootlegging scheme where liquor was smuggled into the U.S. from Bermuda was broken up on this day today when, on a former submarine chaser ship, the officers were wearing the uniforms of the United States Navy, was broken up today when the ships and the crew were seized. So, as we know, back in this time was Prohibition, and the idea of saying, hey, nationwide, it's outlawed, Schedule 1 type of thing. And bootlegging became popular. It was on this day there was a bootlegging scheme that was seized, if you will, coming from Bermuda. That's interesting. So what do you think that's coming from Europe then, right? It's from Bermuda.
Well,
and then
or being produced in some, at the time, all of those islands would have still been subsidiaries of their European,
right.
overlords.
Yeah.
So, it would have functionally been European production, even if it was occurring down in the Caribbean.
Yeah. So then they're like, let's bring that stuff in the United States. Moving forward here, this one a little tough. In 1940, it was on this day, April 23rd, 1940, more than 200 African Americans had died on that day when fire broke out in the Rhythm Night Club in Natchez, Mississippi. It was a nightclub fire that happened in 1940, but the devastating thing is 200 African Americans had died when fire had broken out when that had happened. That's incredible. Never would have heard of that. I'm sure that was something that was in the news back then. That was probably
those
pretty big.
things get lost to history.
Yeah. Moving forward, 5 years later, 1945 is on this date, April 23rd. The United States 10th Army landed what would have been yesterday morning on Okinawa, 362 miles from the Japanese mainland. The landings and the assault on the island met with much less resistance than expected from the Japanese, as it was saying in landing in Okinawa during World War II, and that was a huge turning point in everything with World War II. Moving on, 1957. This one's kind of neat. In April 23rd, 1957, more police forces throughout the United States are to buy and use a greater number of portable speed radar checking devices to enforce speed limits. It was on this day in history that radar devices were used to enforce speed limits. The radar gun, 1957.
I mean, that's a really cool piece of technology, but I will say I'm not all that enthusiastic myself personally about that coming into widespread use.
Now, I'm sure there's an argument there in lieu of the conversation. You can say that because of that, there was hard and fact about the speed at which you were going.
Yeah.
So if you could say, Barney Fife was giving me trouble, but he said I was going 35 and a 25 and he's going to write me a ticket. Now I can say, can I see the gun? Can I see what it was? But some other people might say, well, at the same time, the invention of these radar devices, look how much more money had come from now enforcing these speed limits and stuff, and maybe the idea of the safer side of it. Now, as you're enforcing these, more people are tending to slow down in areas where they were speeding, or some of the other side of it.
Well, I don't know if you've ever driven from Ocala to Jacksonville up 301, but they used to have those speed traps there, and they'd be out there with those radar guns, and the whole town of Waldo was essentially funding themselves with these speeding tickets, and they actually had their police force dissolved temporarily.
Is that right?
Yeah, as a means of controlling that.
Oh, man. This would be a good one. We had Sheriff Billy Woods on, what was it, last week? I would like to throw that one at him. Hey, last week was the inception in 1957.
Well, I bet he likes them.
Yeah. Moving on here, 1967, on this date, April 23rd, 1967, Soviet cosmonaut dies in an accident. Soviet cosmonaut Vladimir Komarov is killed when his parachute fails to deploy during his Soyuz 1 spacecraft landing, which had killed the cosmonaut. And it was not long after that, or I'm trying to think, it was a few years later, the first man to go to space ended up having an accident too, where it took his life. And we know that that's part, though, of going on with the idea of the space race and the amount of courage and bravery that those astronauts put in there. On the other side too, from the Soviets, having their issues with it too, was on this day in 1967, as failed parachute and another cosmonaut had passed. This one's kind of interesting here. Thank you for smoking. On April 23rd, 1970, Public Health Cigarette Smoking Act. President Richard Nixon signed the Public Health Cigarette Smoking Act, which would ban the advertising of cigarettes on television and radio beginning on January 2nd, 1971. Wow. So it was on that date, 1970, they're like, yep, no longer allowed to advertise it on radio here at 96.3 FM or on television, which is kind of interesting because, that means in my lifetime I never saw a cigarette ad on television or heard one on the radio. Still had billboards, obviously, and they were all through magazines.
I remember when I was a child walking right into this Paddock Mall, and there used to be a Joe Camel sign right there.
Yeah.
And then they took that down. Oh, I was really young. I bet my siblings wouldn't even remember ever seeing that. They really kind of nipped that in the bud.
And that's an interesting one there. Joe Camel, they had to take him out of the mix because they're like, he's a cool-looking cartoon figure that's getting children.
Yeah, you're glorifying.
You're glorifying it. And they're like, that was the whole purpose of inventing Joe Camel.
Yeah. It was effective for a long time.
We got a caller. Good morning, WOCA. You're on the air.
It's good morning, guys.
Morning, Hugh.
Speaking of smoking and cigarettes and inflation, I quit smoking back in 1967, a long time ago. I could buy a carton for $2.50. I don't even know what a pack of cigarettes costs now, but I think it's around $7 or $8. I'm not sure.
Oh yeah, and that's why a lot of people smoke 305s. They're the state cigarette, where they're a little bit cheaper. But they're up there in price now. And you're right, that's one of the things, inflation. But it's interesting nonetheless how that turns about. I would be less upset about the inflation of cigarettes more so than like we had a caller mention about candy bars, because I'm thinking I had just watched what was it on the History Channel? It says the food that made America, or the men that made the food that made America, and they talk about the invention of the Three Musketeers bar and the Milky Way and M&Ms and all that, and I'm thinking back then what they did to manufacture those, and where we're at now with the facilities and the capabilities of manufacturing them, that if anything, it doesn't need to be that price, right? Because it costs some pennies to make the trillions of M&Ms that they do. And
right.
I understand on the health side of it where the cigarettes are, and it's like if you up the price, more and more people are less likely to buy them because they are expensive and such.
Right.
But it's interesting.
I do the shopping here with the wife and I since I've been retired 25 years, so I do all the shopping and kind of cooking and everything else. But because I do shopping, people don't realize the price of food in the store, the price of meat and vegetables, and it's $100 won't get you hardly anything in the store. And you're talking about this stimulus package that should be coming around. I see families in the grocery store, a guy and his wife, they have two baskets that are just loaded up. You're looking at $500-600 at least for a basket full of food like that. So it's just I know there's so many people that can use more stimulus money to feed their family, and it's very important that I think that kind of money comes around.
Absolutely. Good point, Hugh. Appreciate it, partner.
Yeah. See, on a quick, real good note, a happy note, my wife's a volunteer at the Humane Society, and good news is that the adoption is going along fairly briskly over there. People are buying their pets, cats and their dogs, to get along with this situation where you're kind of locked in your house for the kids having an animal to fool around with and stuff. So it was good news there, and let's hope it continues.
Yeah, absolutely. That is some good news. That's something to be, yep, absolutely. Thank you very much, partner.
Okay, you bet. Bye now.
Bye. Yeah, they're a big advocate of the Humane Society. She goes there and volunteers. That's some good news out of there.
That's wonderful.
They did get stagnant for a while, and there was a little bit of concern. Yeah. I know about a month when we talked to them, but that's some good news.
I think people are getting lonely.
Yeah, I think so
too.
They
just want a pet. I think that's so sweet. I love that.
That's awesome. I should have asked him what he used to smoke. That's the difference. We were talking. My grandfather. He in 2013 he passed away, but he lived to be 85 years old. And, right, 85, let's do the math real quick, but yeah, around that. And he smoked pretty much all his life. And I was telling somebody else about this, I think what he smoked Winston's. And their big advertisement when I was a kid and everything was, in every magazine and so forth, was no bull. Like, it was the idea of it was just tobacco. Mm-hmm. That's it.
Yeah.
And not all the additives and the stuff, and the difference was how long it took to burn. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking I was cool because there was high school, and Grandpa would be like, "Grab me a pack of cigarettes from the carton." I was like, "Man, he's got like 3 cartons back here. I could snag a pack of cigarettes." And my buddies, go out to the woods and have a couple cigarettes. After 2 of those, I'm like, never again.
Boys are different than girls.
Yeah, it is. But I always thought, I'm like, man, that man smoked all them years. Matter of fact, when he was a few years before he passed, he was actually coming back from the American Legion, no, from the Eagles Club, and it was wintertime, and he was walking back. It was about maybe 600, 800 yards where he was living with Uncle Andy, and as he was walking back, he tripped and fell, and when he had fell, he was outside in the cold, and just got a little bit of hypothermia, but got into the hospital and developed a little bit of pneumonia. And you're thinking, man, he's older. How's that going to work? He's a smoker, smoking all of his life, come out of it, no problem whatsoever.
Some people can do
and then right back to smoking. And it's incredible, absolutely incredible. Moving on from 1970, with no longer being allowed to, as far as Richard Nixon signed into public health, the Public Health Cigarette Smoking Act to no longer advertise on television and radio cigarettes, moves to 1984. April 23rd, 1984, researchers announced that they have discovered and isolated a virus. Says it's likely to be the primary cause of AIDS. The mysterious and deadly disease that destroys the body's protective immune system. It was on this day back in 1984 that they were able to isolate what virus that they say is likely to be the cause of AIDS, the autoimmune deficiency disease. Yeah, that's 1984. That's, 36 years ago.
We've come a really long way since then. Really fantastic treatment options. It's really inspiring and fills me with hope how much progress they've been able to make with things like that. It's just, man, science and our scientists, we're so lucky. Yeah, we are. And one of the things, since you brought that up, it was when I was talking with Galen, I think at the beginning of the week, we were talking a little bit this weekend with some friends and family that were mentioning, their opinions on, how the testing went with all of COVID-19 and stuff. And he kind of stopped me in my tracks, and he says, no, I think it was actually incredible how quickly we were able to get the tests to be so accurate for such a short period of time, in lieu of where we were at in December, not really having a whole lot of testing, and then what the expectations of the testing was in January, to where it came now, as how quickly we're able to find those results. Yeah, I definitely think the biggest criticism of the testing that's gone on during this epidemic is volume of production and access for our medical professionals. But the quality of the test, while I know there's been some questions, I'm with him on the impressiveness of that. It's really more of a supply side issue. Would be my criticism. And then maybe that's the question in there. Why? Why was it such a supply issue? What happened there? Where was the ball dropped on that logistical? Well, there's incentive and there's mandate. Yeah. And so, a lot of those things are in the hands of the people who we've been kind of talking about. In every aspect of this conversation, it kind of boils down to the same people in positions of power who are able to make those decisions. Yep. Which is just incredible, too, when you think about where we're at now and where we're going to be later on. Makes you wonder about the vaccine, doesn't it? And where we're at with that. Lots to be done. Yep. Moving on here. 1998, United States here. On this date, 1998, James Earl Ray, the convicted killer of the Black American civil rights leader Martin Luther King, died from a terminal liver disease while incarcerated. He protested his innocence to the murder until the end, until he died. But it was on this date, 1998, that he passed away. Wow. And it was liver disease.
And then lastly, as we come to the bottom of the 10 o'clock hour here, in 2010, not that long ago, 10 years ago, Arizona has a new immigration law. Arizona's Governor Jan Brewer signed an immigration bill into law that is seen as one of the toughest in the United States, despite criticism by President Barack Obama. The bill will require state police to question people about their immigration status if there is reasonable suspicion. It's aimed to identify, prosecute, and deport illegal immigrants, although it has already unleashed protests and reignited the division battle over immigration reform. 2010, 10 years ago. I very much remember that.
The devil's all in the details.
Yes, it is. As we're coming to the bottom of the 10 o'clock hour here, 96.3 FM, 1370 AM, that wraps up On This Day in History. And stay tuned. When we come back, we'll have County Commissioner Kathy Bryant. You're listening to WOCA, The Source. We're back after this.